شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا فمن يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله ثم أما بعد السلام عليكم. It is a great honor, a great privilege. We normally do the Al-Shama'il al-Muhammadiyya, which is this collection of ahadith that are descriptions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Assalamu alaikum, Adnan. MashaAllah, how are you? Descriptions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Imam al-Tirmidhi, he said concerning this book, if you have this book in your home, the Shama'il, it's as if you have the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in your home with you. You know, he was very meticulous, very detail-oriented. And even though Imam al-Tirmidhi was a great scholar of hadith, this work is unique among the different works that he's collected, among his different compilations. And people say because this work was more than anything else an act of love. You know, he wanted to cultivate love for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and so he intentionally collected ahadith that were rigorous in their authenticity, but also expressive in their wording, in their language, in hope that people reading this collection would develop a closer relationship with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. To date, we've read, let's see, 305 of these ahadith. So you're catching us, you know, well into the book, mashallah. We've read 305 of these hadith, and we have about, I don't know, maybe about 100 left, 120 left until we complete the book. And some students, mashallah, will get, you know, formal license in the completion of the book, mashallah. So we left off on the chapter of the fasting of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we're on the hadith of Aisha. And Aisha radiyallahu anha قالت كان النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يصوم من الشهر السبت والأحد والاثنين ومن الشهر الآخر الثلاثاء والأربعاء والخميس. On the authority of Aisha, who reported the Prophet ﷺ would fast on Saturdays, Sundays, and Mondays of one month, and on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays of another month. Two principles that can be taken away from this. One is tanwiyah, is variation. You know, when the Prophet ﷺ was doing non-obligatory worship, he would always alter the days, alter what he recited, alter the times, so as not to over-routinize, so as not to over-ritualize his relationship with Allah. You know, ritual is, I won't say it's a curse, but ritual has its strengths and ritual has its weaknesses. The strength of ritual is that it develops discipline. You know, when you pray ritually, you become very disciplined. Meaning this is something that I do whether I'm feeling particularly spiritual or not, whether I'm feeling close to God or not, whether I'm at a spiritual high or a spiritual low, whether I'm home or away, working or traveling. But this is my prayer. This is the strength of ritual. You know, ritual is synonymous with discipline. Discipline is being able to do those things that you don't feel like doing, but doing them like you love them because you know there's benefit in them, right? But the weakness of ritual is that you do it so often, it can become mindless. It can become soulless. It can become toothless. It can become, wa'iyadu billah, we seek refuge in God, meaningless. Like I do this so much that I can do it without even thinking about it. You know, I once read a statistic, somebody that does actuary science, you know, they said that most car accidents happen when people are driving on their regular routes because they don't have to focus. When you're driving a route that you've driven hundreds of times, maybe from work to home, this is when you can really zone out. You're less attentive. You're not really paying attention to that bike ride on this orange and white bike coming out. They'll protect me. I want to get home safely. You're not paying attention to this car, that car. You're not paying attention to this person pulling out because you're like an autopilot. Right? When you're driving a road you're unfamiliar with, just to drive effectively, right? You're watching the road. And you're seeing things you haven't seen before, homes you've never seen before, businesses you've never seen before. Oh, I want to try that restaurant. I want to try that restaurant. You're attentive, you're engaged, right? If we over routinize our worship, right, we're not engaged, we're not attentive, we're just on autopilot, right? So the first principle that the Prophet ﷺ would fast Tuesdays, Thursdays, Sundays, Mondays, Wednesdays, Saturdays, he wouldn't over routinize. The second principle is giving us options. That in Islam, we have fara'id, we have obligatory worship. Aside from those obligatory things, you should take full advantage of the free range of options you've been given. If you want to fast tomorrow, fast tomorrow. If you don't have to. If you want to get up and pray the night before fast, get up and pray the night. If you don't want to, you don't have to. Right? And so the Prophet ﷺ often gave people a wide assortment of additional worship that they could do so that they wouldn't limit themselves. The human soul, I was thinking today, it's funny that, subhanAllah, we're reviewing this and I was thinking as I was driving down the street, what is it that we incline to, or why is it that we incline to novelty? But if you've played a certain video game and you played it over and over and over and over, it ceases to be interesting. I played this so much, if you've heard a certain song over and over and over, it's not really interesting. Marketers know that if you want to attract more people to your product, the most valuable thing you can print on the product is NEW, new. Oh man, this is like the cereal aisle experiment. You go to the cereal aisle, you see all of the cereals you've been seeing since you were a kid. There's the Cocoa Puffs, there's the Cinnamon Toast Crunch. So it's new. It's Cinnamon Toast Crunch in a different shape. These are Cinnamon Toast Churros. I wonder what that tastes like. Just like Cinnamon Toast Crunch, you idiot, right? No, but there's something in novelty that we inherently incline toward. Now we have fara'id, we have religious obligations, but inside of those obligations, give yourself some novelty. Delight your soul with some, I think I'm gonna try this. Maybe I'm gonna try that. Maybe I'll fast today. Maybe I'll fast Sunday. Maybe I'll read this. Maybe I'll read that. Maybe I'll recite this. Maybe I'll do that. Keep things interesting, right? Even in our spiritual pursuits, we need novelty. We can lose interest if things are just too routinized, too expected. Sometimes offer the unexpected. عن عائشة رضي الله عنها قالت ما كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يصوم في شهر أكثر من صيامه في شعبان. Oh wait, did we do this? The Aisha said, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would not fast in a single month other than the month of Ramadan more than his fasting during the month of Sha'ban. One thing that I think impacts us, we're disconnected from the sacred calendar of Islam. We don't think about, even if I were to ask, what Islamic month is it? Rhonda, do you know? SubhanAllah. Do you know? Adnan, do you know? Sanya, do you know? We don't even know what Islamic month is. Do I know? No. No, I believe it's the month before the Hijjah, so it's got to be Dhul Qa'dah. I think it's Dhul Qa'dah. But my point is, you see how much collaboration that requires? Where's the month before the Hijjah? Dhul Qa'dah, Dhul We're not connected to the sacred calendar of Islam. And calendars help people to feel a sense of occasion. Yesterday was Juneteenth, which to my surprise is now a national holiday. I did not know that. It's amazing how quickly cultural change can take place. Juneteenth was like this niche thing that some Black folks that really esteem our cultural heritage talked about, celebrated. But you wouldn't imagine 10 years ago that it would be a national holiday and people would actually get off from work for Juneteenth. But subhanAllah, amazing times that we're living in. Amazing times that we're living in. But when you're connected to a calendar, it helps you with gaining a sense of occasion. You feel, oh, it's this day. So there are special etiquette, special manners, special prayers, special acts of service, special, dress, etc., that occasions that day, right? I think, the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that like Yawmul Jum'ah, Friday. This is the every week Eid of the Muslims. That some of that enjoyment, some of that ease, some of that relaxation, some of that very intentional family time that we reserve for Eid, some of it should be for Jum'ah, right? So here she's mentioning Sha'ban as a month in which the Prophet ﷺ used to increase his fasting. Now we'll move to Babu ma ja'a fi qira'ati. Wait. One second. No, I think I skipped one page. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. another عن علقمة قالت سألت عائشة رضي الله عنها أكان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يخص من الأيام شيئا؟ قالت كان عمله ديما وأيكم يطيق ما كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يطيق. On the authority of Al-Qamah, who reported, I asked Aisha radiyallahu anha, did the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam set aside particular days for specific acts of worship? She replied, his deeds were continuous. Dima, who amongst you is able to endure what the Messenger of Allah endured? Aisha was like, come now, don't get ahead of yourself. You're doing, like even asking the question. But this was something that Aisha, being a scholar among the companions, that she would emphasize when teaching the companions. The Prophet ﷺ was not a spiritual dabbler. Some of us were spiritual dabblers, like we dabble. No, when he committed to something, his performance of that action was continuous. Everything that he did regularly. So his increase in his worship was marked by consistency. See, when he decided, I'm gonna fast 3 days out of the 13th, 14th, and 15th days of each lunar month, he's doing that. If he decides I'm going to give away all of my surplus income, or all of my surplus wealth every day before I retire, he's doing that. You see, us, we struggle. We live between our spiritual rank, our maqam, and our spiritual states, our ahwal. Sometimes, like after a conference or after a good class or after a faith-affirming experience, that spiritual state is like on 20,000. We used to call it post-Islamic conference exaggerated iman syndrome. You know what I'm saying? It's like you come out of that conference and you're like, what am I doing with my life? I'm gonna give, I'm selling the car. I'm gonna give away all of this excess that I don't need. He does it, and in 2 weeks, he's like, I gotta buy another car. What was I thinking? Because that was a spiritual state. It wasn't a spiritual rank. right? That was just, you were having, a good week. The conference was really good. The speaker really inspired you. And you ended up biting off a little more than you were able to chew. And that's why many people say the best spiritual growth is sustainable spiritual growth. That even in how you raise yourself spiritually, don't yo-yo between excess and deprivation. Excess and that one, I'm fasting every day. I'm never fasting again except for Ramadan. I'm reading a juz of Quran. I won't read Quran except once a year. Right? I'm giving away all of my savings. I won't give anybody sadaqah for the next 10 years. No, just try to grow in ways that are sustainable, that you can maintain. And that might be expressed in telling someone, I'm not ready for, I'm not there yet. Like, it's okay to say, no, I'm not quite. I'm not there yet, because if I jump to that level, I will inevitably experience burnout. Like, I'll get burnt out. Like, if I start reading a half Quran every day, I'm gonna get burnt out. But if I say I want to read a half juz every day, I think I can do that. I want to read a half juz every day. Maybe I can do that. Maybe for some people, I just want to read 2 pages every day. Maybe for some people, I just want to read 1 page. Maybe for some people, 1 ayah every day. And if you can commit to that, you will inevitably find an enjoyment in that, and you will actually want more. There are great parallels in this regard between physical health and spiritual health. If you want to get in shape physically, nobody would advise you to go into the gym on your first day and just max out, because you're never going to come back. You're going to be so sore. The entire experience will be regrettable. Oh my God. But if you go in, do a little bit, of course, there's a little soreness, no pain, no gain, right? But it's enough to what? Leave you wanting more. Man, I can't wait to come back tomorrow. This is how your spiritual growth occurs, when it's occurring at a sustainable level. Man, I read a couple ayahs of Quran today. Can't wait to read them tomorrow. That was great. Can't wait to read them Wednesday. It was great, right? So the Prophet ﷺ, his ibadah, his worship, it was consistent. He said, خير الأمور عند الله أدومها وإن قل. The best deeds to Allah are those that are performed with the most consistency, even if they're small. Every time I'm teaching this principle or reading this hadith, just make sure it's not my word. Every time I'm reading this hadith or teaching this principle, I always end up kicking myself, because I'm reminded of the statement of Ibn Ata'illah, a great scholar of Islam. He said, if you gave the equivalent of a quarter every day in charity, but every day of your life, that would be enough for Allah to enter you into heaven among the people of Sadaqah. Because it's not a quantitative exercise, it's a qualitative exercise. It's like, it's just a quarter, but you were so committed to giving it, you made sure you gave it every day. Think about how much sadaqah one could accumulate if you gave out $5 every day. Just $5. Just the price of a cup of coffee. What they say on every appeal that they make for charity, the price of a grande, price of $5 every day. But if you did that do you know the commitment that would take? Many people probably would have a hard time believing that giving $5 a day requires a greater commitment than giving 365 times 5. Quick, at 9, how much is that? 1,600. At 9. What kind of Nigerian are you?
It would be roughly 1,800. So 1,300 divided by 2 is 1,865 times 4 equals 260 plus 5 is 325. So that would be 1,800 plus 325, which is
2135, right? 2135. They say giving $5 every day requires more commitment than giving $21.35 one time. Right? You write the $21.35, you write the check for $2,135, you give it, you go back to living your life. So, but if you gave $5 every day, it requires much more commitment. And that's what the Prophet that Allah actually loves more the $5 that were given every day than the $21.35 that's given at one time. Person says, I do this every day. Because doing it every day is going to spiritually carve, sculpt, mold you. And this was something I had to commit myself to on a daily basis, right? Giving $21.35 one time is a relief. It's like, okay, that's over. Now I can go back to the student, which is okay. It's okay if you do that. If someone says, I give $5 a day equivalent in one check. I don't have to think about that anymore. But that is the thing. It's the thinking about it every day. It's not the $5. It's the fact that every day you had to get up and say, okay, where am I going to put this $5? Right? The best deeds to Allah are those that are performed with the most consistency, even if they're small. It's not about how little or how much. It's about how consistently you do it. How consistently you do it. Our habits make us us, right? See, if I give $21.35 one time this year, yes, I'm a charitable person because I gave, but if I give $5 every day, giving has become a part of my character. This is something I do every day, right? This is a part of me, and then I think too, it will leave you wanting more. I give $5 now. Maybe this year I'll try $10 every day. So that's 4,270. Right? Wow. It's starting to get more impressive. Right? It's starting to get more impressive. The other thing is that when Al-Shama'il asked the question, Aisha kind of checked him and said, وَمَنْ مِنْكُمْ يُتِيقُ مَا يُتِيقُ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ. Who among you can do what he did? So, right, you're asking about like his personal worship. There's a reason why it was personal, right? There's a reason why you know what he did in public. His 5 prayers, his fasting for the month of Ramadan, etc. You're asking me about what his private worship was like? Don't go there. You're not ready for that, right? Right? This is above your pay grade to use that expression, right? You're not ready for that. Right, MashaAllah. عن عائشة قالت دخل علي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وعندي امرأة فقال من هذه؟ قلت فلانة لا تنام الليل. فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم عليكم من الأعمال ما تطيقون فوالله لا يمل الله حتى تملوا. وكان أحب ذلك إلى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم الذي يدوم عليه صاحبه. Beautiful hadith. There's so much in this hadith, mashallah. On the authority of Aisha, you see all of these hadith are narrated by Aisha. Right? She was there. Right? She was close. If you wanted knowledge of these things, you had to go to her. There was no one else who could give you this. Right? This is why the Prophet said, take half of your religion from this woman. Right? Take half of your religion from her. She was there. She was close. She saw. She said that she had company. Aisha said, the Messenger of Allah ﷺ, came into the house and there was a woman in my company. A friend of mine was at the house with me. And so the Prophet ﷺ said, who is this? Right? Which shows you it's not impolite. Some people think it's impolite to ask, if you come into someone's presence or you come into your home and maybe your husband, your wife, there's a friend there to say, who is this? That's not impolite. Right? It's not like you can't say like, I wanted to know who was in my house, but I couldn't ask because it would be rude. The Prophet said, men have it. Men have it. Who is this? Right? And Aisha said, she is so-and-so, and she said in glowing words of praise, she doesn't sleep at night. La tanamu layl. She is so-and-so, she doesn't sleep at night. And you get the sense that Aisha thought that this woman would be honored to have the Prophet ﷺ know about the intensity of her worship. Like, Ya Rasulullah, this is so-and-so, she doesn't sleep at night. That's how much she prays, right? The Prophet ﷺ then said, perform righteous actions that you can bear. Don't exhaust yourself, right? Don't exhaust yourself. Do good deeds that you can sustain. Perform actions that you can bear. And you imagine Aisha in this mawqif, in this position. This is a paradigm shift for her. She thought she was telling the Prophet ﷺ something commendable about this woman. Like, yo, check this out. And probably thought like, I'm gonna get you a word of praise, commendation. I'm going to get you a glad tiding from the Prophet ﷺ. And didn't know that what she was actually going to get was a correction from the Prophet ﷺ. It's kind of like somebody telling you, you're sitting with like a personal trainer and you say, I work out every day. And they start talking to you about the importance of rest. Say, oh, right? So they shifted the paradigm. You thought this is going to be something good that she doesn't sleep at night. The Prophet says, no. Perform a righteous action, what you can bear. Don't exhaust yourself. He said, for by Allah, Allah does not cease rewarding you until you become bored, right? The most beloved actions to the Messenger of Allah were those done consistently. So the actual wording of the hadith is actually a little bit better than I think they translated. For wallahi la yamallu Allahu hatta tamallu. La yamallu Allah is like Allah does not grow disinterested. La yamallu Allah. Allah does not. Malla yamillu or malla yamallu, both are acceptable pronunciations. It means to grow disinterested. Something that is mumil in Arabic is usually translated as boring. If you say, how was Ubaidullah's class? Mumil, boring. Right? Mumil is boring. Something that literally means it makes you disinterested. Right? So here he's saying, listen, Allah never gets disinterested in accepting your good deeds. Like, this is one of the meanings of the name of Allah, Ash-Shakur. It literally means the appreciative one. Now think about it. God has given us everything. He's in need of nothing. How does he show appreciation? No, Ash-Shakur refers to what? His perpetual acceptance of your deeds. Like Allah never says, okay, look, it's enough. Look, man, it's enough deeds. So, okay, all right, it's enough praying, man. It's enough, okay, you got enough prayers. Well, it's too much. No, Allah always, Allah does not, tamillu or tamallu, you do get bored. Right? You do get bored. And I find that there's a stark realism in this hadith. The Prophet ﷺ is not offering us some flowery, when you're worshiping Allah, you never get tired. I mean, it's God. How could you ever grow bored of worshiping God? He's God. How could you ever do enough? Could you ever feel like this is too much? No, yes, you could. Right? Even in the worship of Allah. Even in the worship of Allah, you could grow to feel like this is too much. This prayer was too long. Right? Afatanun anta ya Mu'adh. Are you a person who wants to create fitna for people? Ya Mu'adh. Mu'adh ibn Jabal, the companion of the Prophet ﷺ, he would lead people in prayer and he would pray too long. He loved to recite the Quran and he would pray hours. People would start leaving the prayer. Man, this is too long, too much. They would go, they would complain to the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet said, what, afatanun anta ya Mu'adh? Do you want to be a fitna for people? This beautiful prophetic realization about the nature of human beings, that even a good thing we can get tired of if it's done excessively. Even prayer, even anything is like, bro, I can't, when I was in school, whenever we had exams, you were just buried in Arabic literature. You would be dreaming in Arabic. And I read the work of some neurologists, and he said, people don't read in their dreams. You may think but you cannot read in a dream. I was like, baloney. I would be reading Arabic in my dreams. I'm talking, I had Arabic coming out of my ears, Arabic coming out of my eyes, Arabic coming out of my nose, just Arabic. It's just, whenever the exams ended, I would go to a magazine stand and I would buy the most frivolous magazines imaginable. Give me GQ, give me Esquire, give me Kinfolk, give me, Monocle, give me anything. And I would walk past the other students and I would proudly declare my research. Right? I need this. This has become excessive. That's the nature of the human being. Anything done excessively will quickly be tired of, right? Ahmed Zarouk, a great spiritual teacher, he said, every extreme is followed by its opposite. This is why the goal is balance. Every extreme is followed by its opposite, not just in your spiritual life, in everything. If you go extreme to the right, you're going to go extreme to the left, just trying to find some balance. It's like if you go extremely hardcore, it's like, I'm not watching any movies, I'm not listening to the internet, I'm off the grid completely. Now you just binge watched, an entire 3 series over the last week. You went too far. And that's why if you stay in the middle and then you gradually get stronger, you'll be able to be at that place that you desire, but in a sustainable way. Right? I'm here, but I don't feel like I can't make it here. I'm here and I feel like this is my place. Right? So she ended the hadith by saying, وَكَانَ أَحَبُّ ذَلِكَ إِلَى رَسُولِ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وسلم الَّذِي يَدُومُ عَلَيْهِ صَاحِبُ, that the actions that the Prophet ﷺ loved the most were those performed most consistently. So if somebody did this great act of worship one time, she's saying that wouldn't impress the Prophet ﷺ. Right? This person did this one time. But if somebody could perform a small act of worship consistently, this would impress the Prophet ﷺ. Right? MashaAllah. عن أبي صالح قال سألت عائشة وأم سلمة أي العمل كان أحب إلى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قالتا ما ديم عليه وإن قل. Same meaning. That on the authority of Abu Salih, who reported, I asked Aisha and Salama, 2 wives of the Prophet ﷺ, which deed was most beloved to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? They replied, that which is done consistently, even if it's little. What I find also just refreshing about this hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, here you have 2 women of Quraysh, Aisha and Salama, that before Islam, the Qurayshi women, by their own testimony, they said they were almost like chattel. They were almost like property. They were just inherited. They were married away without their consent. When they were regarded by men, they were regarded as playthings, things that you decorate, you stand around, you make look good. You seek sexual gratification from women, but that's really about it. They didn't own any property. They didn't have very much property rights. They didn't have any position of authority in that Meccan community. Right? Just make sure it's not my wife. Speaking of women with authority, okay. Just feel that she got a whole lot of authority. You know what I mean? but they didn't have a lot of authority in that Meccan community. And here, within 23 years of the mission of the Prophet ﷺ, people are coming to them, asking them about the most intimate and important details of their religious lives. Like a woman going from someone that you just, women that's empty-minded, vacuous, completely devoid of serious ideas, to how am I supposed to worship God? No one contains a better understanding of this than you, right? So Abu Saleh, right? He said, I went to Aisha and Salama. I want to know which deeds I can do to get to heaven. I go and I ask these women, what should I be doing if I want to go to heaven? They said, whatever you do, make it consistent, because this is what was beloved to the Prophet ﷺ, right? So they've been elevated to the position of now teachers, right? They're teachers, mashallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. عن عمرو بن قيس أنه سمع عن عاصم بن حميد قال سمعت عوف بن مالك يقول كنت مع رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ليلة فاستاك ثم تودأ ثم قام يصلي فقمت معه فبدأ فاستفتح البقرة فلا يمر بآية رحمة إلا وقف فسأل ولا يمر بآية عذاب إلا وقف فتعوذ ثم ركع فمكث راكعا بقدر قيامه ويقول في ركوعه سبحان ذي الجبروت والملكوت والكبرياء والعظمة ثم سجد بقدر ركوعه ويقول في سجود سبحان ذي الجبروت والملكوت والكبرياء والعظمة ثم قرأ آل عمران ثم سورة يفعل مثل ذلك. On the authority of Asim ibn Humayd, who said, I heard Auf ibn Malik say, I was with the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam one night. So now Auf is about to be given a glimpse into the private worship of the Prophet alayhi wasallam. 2 classes ago, we were talking about the deliberate difference between the private and public worship of the Prophet alayhi wasallam. His public worship was intended to be accessible and not to exhaust anybody. Even if he heard a child crying, he would speed up the prayer thinking, I don't want his mom to be anxious, right? He would, pray Taraweeh, some days in the masjid, some days he would skip. He would say, وَلَوْلَا أَنْ أَشُقَّ عَلَى أُمَّتِي لَأَمَرْتُهُمْ بِالسِّوَاكِ لِكُلِّ الصَّلَاةِ. If it weren't for the fact that I don't want things to be hard for my ummah, I would tell them to use the toothstick and clean their teeth before every prayer, right? وَلَوْلَا أَنْ أَشُقَّ. If I didn't want to make things hard, if I didn't care about making things hard, but he cared about making things hard, so he wouldn't do that. Right? I want things to be easy. I'm not going to do that. But now Auf, he's with the Prophet ﷺ after Isha, and he's going to be given a glimpse into, okay, when I'm alone, this is how I worship. When I'm before the companions, you see me, I say the Isha prayer, I say the Maghrib prayer. This is how I worship when I'm by myself. So the Prophet ﷺ said, Auf said, Auf ibn Malik, first he used the toothstick. He cleaned his teeth with this way. Clean his teeth, right? The Prophet ﷺ would almost always clean his teeth before he worshiped, right? Some people say it's because takbirat al-ihram, when you make takbirat al-ihram or takbirat al-tahrim, the word tahrim literally means making something haram. Because when you say Allahu Akbar, things that are normally halal become haram, like talking. You can't talk and pray at the same time. Like eating, things like that. So if you have something stuck in your teeth and you swallow it as you're praying, this affects the state of the prayer, right? So some people say he wanted to just make sure that his teeth were clean before he prayed because he didn't want to swallow or ingest any food before he prayed. Some people say it was matharatun lil-fam, that because he was going to be reciting the Quran, he wanted to make sure that his breath was fresh, right? Because of course, when you talk, I know because I talk a lot. If you're not careful, it can, your breath can become unpleasant, through talking, right? Nevertheless, the Prophet ﷺ would always use the two-stick before he prayed. He wouldn't tell other people to do that, but that was his practice. ثُمَّ تَوَضَّأَ. Then he made wudu. Then he stood in prayer. I stood with him. He began, after reciting Surah Al-Fatiha, reciting the entire chapter of Baqarah. That's just the first rak'ah. Okay? Told you this. Again, this is not the Salawat al-Khamsa. This is not Fajr or Dhuhr or Asr or Maghrib or Isha. The Prophet, he's alone now. See, these are the ethics that lead to sincerity. These are the ethics that we've forgotten. Right? Our longest prayers are in front of other people. Our shortest prayers are at home. Our deepest devotion is at parties. Right? We go to parties and sit in the corner. You gonna watch the game? Fourth quarter's getting tight. And our most silly moments are at home. You should have been laughing like that at the party. I need to write a book called The Fiqh of Chilling. You should have been laughing like that at the party. That's actually sunnah. You're supposed to be laughing at the party. You're supposed to enjoy yourself at the party. When you go home, this is when you can cut all of the devices off and get into this worship. When you're home by yourself and no one else can see you. You see? Right? The Prophet, he recited Baqarah. He said, he did not pass a single verse mentioning mercy, except that he would pause and pray to Allah for mercy. Right? So again, he's now giving you the character of the worship of the prayer of the Prophet. He wasn't just reciting, like sometimes I think like in Ramadan, we want the blessing of doing a khatam of the Quran. So we're just reciting like a bulbul. We're not even thinking about it. Just so we can say, I did it. I finished. If he recited a verse about the mercy of God, he stopped and he prayed for mercy. He did not pass a single verse mentioning punishment, except that he would pause and ask God for refuge from punishment. Then he bowed, and he bowed for as long as he stood. Just go ahead and think about that for a minute. His ruku' was the same length of time that it took to recite Baqarah. Hey, go ahead, let that sink in for a minute. Right, let that sink in for a minute. And mind you, again, this is not the public worship of the Prophet. He wouldn't do that. He wouldn't do that to people. See, this is where you see the courtesy of the Prophet. He wouldn't do that to anybody. But Auf ibn Malik, it's like, you want to hang with the big boy? You want to bamba? Remember the TikTok? You want to hang with the big boys? You know what I mean? You want to hang with the big boys? Oh, you want to worship with me at night? Okay. If you want to roll, right? He prays Baqarah, he bows, his ruku' is the same length of time that it took him to recite Baqarah. Right? He said in his bowing, glorified is the possessor of Jabrut. Jabrut is, how would I translate Jabrut? And the Malakut. He said that, you said, how would they? Jabrut. Okay, Jabrut and Malakut. So he said Malakut comes from mulk. When you say the Malakut, it refers to the dominion Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the possessor of the dominion. That means he is the God of everything that exists, which is, I think, something that becomes more impressive the more you know about what exists, right? When you know about everything, when you see, we went snorkeling, we went to Florida Keys for vacation. When you see, different school fish, swim by, and you think, man, they're awesome because Allah. Like, down to these creatures in the depths, and this is not the depth of the sea, we're snorkeling, we're on the surface of the water, right? We're not scuba diving, we're snorkeling, right? We're on the surface of the water. And Allah is providing for creatures there. Every day, I don't even have an awareness of it. And the deeper you went into the ocean, you would only see more creatures that God is providing for. Right? This is that He's the possessor of the malakut. Everything in existence, Allah provides for. Right? I was in when I was in New York. New York City is an interesting place. New York City is an interesting place. One of the things I find interesting about New York is that even though some of the wealthiest people in the world live in New York City, in fact, I think per capita, New York has more billionaires than any other city in the world. Right? You still are everything is so close. So even if you're walking up Park Place in, the Upper East Side, there's still rats and trash. It's like even people like that, you don't have the ability to create like your own separate world. Central Park is right there. Tourists are just walking through. It's not like Chicago's North Shore. You go to the North Shore of Chicago, that's a different world. You have the Kenilworth and Winnetka, Wilmette, that's a different world. It's like, and I think that, I'd imagine for it to retain its character, it must be policed very like the culture and the people trying to retain which is where a lot of Chicago's own finance community actually lives. It's in the North Shore, right? But you go to the Upper East Side, it's like, it's right there in the middle of everything else. So we were walking, a friend of mine and I were walking in the Upper East Side. And we just saw two rats just run out from a building and they were like fighting over a piece of food. And I just said to myself, so I don't know. Even their Lord is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Just these two rats, Allah even provides for them. It's like everything. He is the possessor of the malakut. And the Jabaruts were for it. Whenever you hear Jabbar in Arabic, Jabbar, Al-Jabbar is the forceful, the compeller. The irresistible, Jabbar, the translation I like, irresistible. Translation is such an art. I used to work as a translator. And you can completely change the tone and feel of a piece by how you translate it. So if you say El-Jabbar, if you say the compeller, it almost sounds like violent a bit, or the forceful. But if you say the irresistible, it conveys the same meaning. It's forceful. Allah can't be resisted, but it doesn't sound as, because irresistible is, it just has a different connotation than forceful, right? So El-Jabbar, the translation I would choose is probably the irresistible. So the Jabarut, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has force that is irresistible, right? Whatever He wants, there is none that can stand in the way of the realization of that thing. There is none to say, hey, wait a second, maybe we can negotiate a little bit. The Jabarut is, I always joke with you guys that, a non-Muslim friend, colleague was given the Quran, and they were asked, what do you think about the Quran? I said, I don't know. The God of the Quran is kind of bossy, kind of bossy. And my friend's reply was, if you were omnipotent, how would you be? Probably kind of bossy. If you were omnipotent, how would you be? But it's only through an understanding of God's omnipotence that you can understand His mercy. See, it's almost like we can't be completely merciful because even my kindness, even my good conduct, there's still something in it for me. Maybe it's If I'm Muslim, maybe it's because I want God to judge me, with kindness. Maybe it's something I do in an effort to avoid conflict. And to say people really dislike conflict, right? Some people, they don't have like a commitment to good character or kindness, but they don't want any, I don't want to be a confrontation. So their kindness is really a protection for themselves. I just, whatever I can do, whatever I need to do to not see this become confrontation. Whatever, if you need me to say, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I'm really not sorry, but I don't want to get into a fight. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm really actually not sorry. I don't want to fight you. The only person that can show, or the only one that can show true kindness is the one that has no fear of anyone or anything because they cannot be resisted. And they still show kindness, then it's truly kindness. My kindness is not a negotiation in kind. Not like, I'm going to do this so you can do, I don't need anything. And Allah's still merciful. If I wanted to, I could destroy anything, and Allah is still merciful. He's still forbearing, right? He's still all forgiving, right? So you kind of have to understand those jalali qualities of Allah like that. To understand those jamali, those beautiful qualities of Allah. One has to be seen through the lens of the other, right? You understand the beauty of God when you see that if God wanted to, he doesn't have to be, he's omnipotent. He's omniscient. He doesn't have to be nice. He doesn't have to be merciful. He can be however he wants to be, but he is merciful. You see? Then he recited in the second rak'ah, the chapter of Ali Imran. SubhanAllah. What a long prayer. And his bowing in the second unit of prayer was the length of time that he took to recite Ali Imran. It's like a 4.5 hour prayer. It's like a 4 hour prayer, 4.5 hour prayer. Right? This was, the Prophet ﷺ, in his private worship, it was almost ascetic. It was almost monastic in terms of the intensity and the level that he would go to. He didn't want that for his community, so he did not embody that in public. But in terms of his devotion to Allah, his relationship with Allah, this is the intensity with which he would worship. We'll do one more chapter and then we'll open for questions, inshallah. باب ما جاء في قراءة رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. What has been narrated concerning the Quranic recitation of the Messenger of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم عن ابن أبي مليكة عن يعلى ابن مملك أنه سأل أم سلمة عن قراءة رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فإذا هي تنعت قراءة مفسرة حرفا حرفا. Ya'la ibn Mamlak reported that he asked Salama about the recitation of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. She immediately, right, described his recitation. It was a clear recitation, letter by letter. That the Prophet ﷺ would recite the Quran slowly, clearly, and you could hear him enunciating every single letter, giving every letter its haq, giving every letter its right. This is how he would recite. If I were to think about a reciter that recites in that way, of course, my Egyptian bias, because I studied at Azhar, coming in here, was Sheikh al-Husari, Khalil al-Husari. If you listen to Husari, Hussary, everything is on YouTube now. If you listen to Sheikh Husari, I think, and of course, I am no mutakhassis, I am no specialist in Quranic recitation. But whenever I listen to Sheikh Husari, I always think this is what is being described of the recitation of the Prophet ﷺ. It wasn't, like Sheikh Husari's recitation, it's not over embellished. It's not, he doesn't have the most melodious voice of anyone you've ever heard. But it is sweet. And it's very deliberate, and it's, when you listen to Sheikh Husari, if you could write fast enough, you could write the letters as he's saying. That's how clear it is. You can hear every single letter, right? Salam is saying this is how the Prophet ﷺ would recite. He would recite clear and harafan, letter by letter, letter by letter. He wouldn't rush. Right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually said to him, La tasta'jil bi, right? Don't rush with the Quran. Let it sink in. You know, one thing that I've observed about classical music versus pop music. You know, the thing about pop music is that the songs are very short, right? So if you think about like musical performances, when somebody would go to a concerto or somebody would go and listen to a classical piece being played, do you know how long the piece would be? An hour and 15 minutes. That's one piece. One composition is an hour. So what ends up happening, and yes, I know some of you are thinking, is he explaining the Quran with music? Yes, I'm doing it. Yes, I'm doing it. Right? What ends up happening is that music is able to create the environment in which it can be appreciated. You see, you know, a friend of mine who's a great lover of music, he said, you know, most music, it can only be appreciated at the highest level if you give it time to create its space. Like it has to create, like there's a space that is created. There's a vibe that is created by these sounds. Once that vibe has been created, that vibe kind of permeates the space, now you are ready to appreciate what is here. With pop, and most popular songs now, the song is 5 minutes, tops, right? Now that music has moved to the streaming platforms, 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes, right? So you're just getting a very densely packaged, you know, almost sonic overload, just sounds, because it's over so quickly, right? It's over so quickly, and you switch to the next thing. One of the reasons that the Quran is not to be rushed is that the Quran, more than music, if you give it space, it will create the ambiance. It will create the atmosphere in which it is appreciated. If you wake up and you listen to the Quran and you give it a half an hour to just work itself, just to kind of work itself into the space, to get everybody in the space on its accord, meaning like, okay, now we're settled into it now, right? It's like, you came downstairs, you're rushing, you're ready to go, but now, the Quran is playing, you're sitting at the breakfast table, you're in the breakfast nook, waiting. But now, from a heart that's racing, ready to get out there and get in the car, you've started to slow down now. You're becoming more patient. You're becoming more reflective. You're becoming more contemplative, right? You're becoming more deliberate. Now the Quran is here. Now that second 30 minutes is really enjoyable. But because we've been conditioned by pop music, a lot of people, it's like, I listen to the Quran, I don't get a lot of it. I'm like, how long do you listen to it? I try to listen to it 10, 15 minutes. You're not giving it time to cleanse the palate, to cleanse the auditory palate, to let it work through, right? Let it get in, get into a vibe, get into a mode. Also too, your surroundings. So Hafidhah Allah, may Allah bless her, preserve her. My wife comes down in the morning, she burns her oud, because I usually pray, I go to the gym, try to get some physical exercise. I come back, she's up, she burns her oud, she's praying the Quran. The combination of the oud, the Quran is just something that I look forward to. They complement each other, okay? It's like we're setting the mood, it's time to get with this. It's like, you go to some restaurants, the lighting is always dim, right? Because they're trying to foster a certain kind of ambiance. Right? get with this, get with the vibe, right? Get with the vibe. You know, that's one thing that, you know, if we are a community that is inattentive to aesthetics, we don't pay attention to these things. We don't pay attention to mood, atmosphere, vibe, tone. You're going to miss something. You're going to miss something, right? عن قتادة قال قلت لأنس بن مالك كيف كانت قراءة رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال مدا ما شاء الله. One word on the authority of Qatada, who reported, I asked Anas ibn Malik, how was the recitation of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? He replied in one word, extended, meant and prolonged. So it's kind of like, you know, anything that can be described in one word is always, those are very strong descriptions, right? In fact, you know, eloquence, and I'm speaking as someone who wishes he was, you know, an eloquent speaker. Eloquence is always an economy in writing and speech. The more you can describe with less words, the more elegant your speech is, the more, you know, economical your speech is, right? And the stronger the description is. So in one word, how was the recitation of the Prophet? Meddan, long, extended, prolonged. He enjoyed reciting the Quran. You know, that reminds me of a story of, it was this human rights activist that was doing a report ostensibly on some programs that were being offered at the prison. But undercover, they were actually reporting about human rights abuses that were taking place at the prison. Because of course, the warden is not going to let somebody come in and tell the world that there's human rights abuses taking place at the prison. And so after, you know, gaining the trust of the administration, she said, okay, I need like a 2-minute, we got 2 minutes tops, soliloquy from the most eloquent inmate to just appeal directly to the camera, right? Bridge the fourth wall, appeal directly to the viewers about what it's like to be a prisoner at this prison where these human rights abuses take place. And she said that the inmates, they were really serious and they developed very strict criteria for choosing who was the most eloquent. Who was going to give this 2-minute appeal, right? They had all these contests. And finally, this one guy won out by vote. He had the majority of people that voted said he is the most eloquent and well-spoken. He has the most, you know, captivating voice, etc. So when he set up for his soliloquy, she said, now I just want you to tell all of the viewers out there what it has been like to be a prisoner at this facility. He cleared his throat, he looked directly into the camera and he said, Helen, oh, Helen. That's the wrong way. I said, you know what? He really was the most eloquent. Because that, to see a man in front of a camera saying, help, that might convey the message of what we need from you more than a polished address about, well, the human creature has a dignity. No, help, help. Right? We are being treated like property here. We're being treated like subhuman creatures here. Help us, right? So whenever something can be described in one word, the impression it leaves is searing, right? How was his recitation? Long. That's how it was. عن أم سلمة قالت كان النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يقطع قراءته يقول الحمد لله رب العالمين ثم يقف ثم يقول الرحمن الرحيم ثم يقف وكان يقرأ مالك يوم الدين. On the authority of Salama, who reported, when reciting, the Prophet ﷺ would make clear separations between the verses. He would recite, all praise is due to Allah, the Lord of the worlds, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, and he would pause. Right? He would pause. Then he would recite, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, and he would pause. Then he would recite, Maliki Yawmiddin, and he would pause. Right? Now, two things that come to mind. One, we never do anything we love real quick. I got this from my dear colleague, Abdurrahman Murphy. He said, how often do you hear people say, hey man, look, I'm gonna be over there in 1 second. Just let me pray real quick. Let me pray right quick. Yeah, oh yeah. Let me pray real quick. He said, think about how, and it doesn't mean that you don't do something quickly or do something efficiently, but think about how you describe the way you do something you love. Right? So Sunday mornings, if I'm home, I'm not traveling, I love to go out and drive my car on back roads, up hills, and going out Wisconsin, Fort Sheridan. I never tell my wife after praying Fajr or, okay, babe, I'm just gonna take a drive right quick. No, because I love this. It's something that I really enjoy doing. Right? I savor it. Right? You savor it. You don't describe it as right quick. Right? So the Prophet ﷺ, he didn't recite the Quran right quick. He recited and he paused. The other thing I get from this is that, and this is not from any classical source, just me thinking if you're allowed to do that in Islam. I hope so. There's some, good speakers, good performers. They say that mastering the art of public address is really knowing how to use pauses. Knowing how to use pauses to create tension, to build suspense. Right? This is what a master narrator does. And then he came into the room. He was carrying an axe. Maybe not that many pauses. I'm still working on my story core. It's not ready yet. My point is, knowing how to create suspense with pauses is the sign of a master narrator or storyteller. I think it's interesting that the Prophet, he would recite Quran and he would use those pauses. Like, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, Malik Yawmiddin. Right, those pauses, letting it, right, using those pauses. MashaAllah. عن عبد الله ابن قيس قال سألت عائشة رضي الله عنها عن قراءة النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم كان يسر بالقراءة أم يجهر؟ قالت كل ذلك قد كان يفعل، قد كان ربما أصر وربما جهر، فقلت الحمد لله الذي جعل في الأمر ساعة. I love these hadith because Aisha, she's doing so much in these hadith, teaching people the sunnah, but also teaching them to lighten up. Like, it's not, this is not nearly as strict and regimented as you assume it to be, right? So, Abdullah ibn Abi Qais said, I asked Aisha radiallahu anha about the recitation of the Prophet ﷺ, and whether he did it silently or audibly. Did he recite the Quran like where you could hear him, or did he just recite to himself? She replied, he did both. Sometimes he would recite silently, and sometimes he would recite audibly. I said, all praise is due to Allah who granted us latitude in this matter, right? That when the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, or members of the Salaf, that early community, when they learned that there was space in something, they praised Allah. Right? We learn there's space in something, we get frustrated. Right? Some people ask me questions and I say, whatever you want to do, come on, man, I thought you knew something about Islam. I'm telling you what I know, man. Well, it's not however you want to do it. It's an amr maftuh. It's open. It's open-ended. You do what you want. It's like if they can't be an automaton robot, then they're not interested. Right? He said, Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah alladhi ja'ala fi amrin sa'a. Praise be to Allah that has given us in this matter space, latitude. That's a great prayer. Right? MashaAllah, there's a great blessing in something being easy, right? And giving us latitude to choose. عن يحيى ابن جعدة عن هاني قالت كنت أسمع قراءة النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم بالليل وأنا على عريشي. On the authority of Hani, who reported, I heard the recitation of the Prophet ﷺ while I was asleep on my bed. And Hani was not one of the wives of the Prophet ﷺ, but she had an apartment that was adjacent to where the Prophet ﷺ was reciting. So she is saying that his recitation was audible because she could hear it. Right? As she was lying down on her bed, she could hear him from the window reciting the Quran. Right? One thing you see over and over again, you see women teaching. The field of Islamic studies in which women used to primarily excel was hadith. Right? In all of the fields of Islamic studies, women have made maybe the greatest contribution to hadith, and then after that, maybe to Islamic law or I'm completely excluding like spirituality and stuff like that, but hadith, right? Mashallah, you see that the presence of women in hadith. Mashallah. How many more do we have in this? Let's try to finish this section, inshallah. I have 7 minutes or so. Just finish the section. عن معاوية بن قرة قال سمعت عبد الله بن مغفل يقول رأيت النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم على ناقته يوم الفتح وهو يقرأ إنا فتحنا لك فتحا مبينا ليغفر لك الله ما تقدم من ذنبك وما تأخر. قال فقرأ ورجع. وقال معاوية بن قرة لولا أن يجتمع الناس علي لأخذت لكم في ذلك الصوت أو قال اللحن. On the authority of Muawiyah ibn Qurra, who reported, I heard Abdullah ibn Mughaffal say, I saw the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam riding his camel on the day of conquest of Mecca. He was reciting the opening 2 verses of Surah Al-Fath. Certainly we have given you a manifest victory that Allah may forgive by means of you the sins of those who came before and the sins of those who are to come. Interesting translation. Abdullah ibn Mughaffal said, the Prophet recited this verse over and over. He recited the verse over and over again. He, Shu'bah, said, Muawiyah ibn Qurra added, were it not that people would crowd around me, I would demonstrate to you the voice that he recited it in. I will show you the style. So here, Abdullah ibn Mughaffal is narrating from Muawiyah ibn Qurra, which is different than the famous Muawiyah, not the famous Muawiyah. It's a different Muawiyah. He told him how the Prophet was reciting when he entered Mecca on Yom al-Fath, on the day of the Fath of Mecca. And he said, man, if you guys would crowd around me, I would even show you how he sounded when he recited. Right? 2 more hadith in the section. عن قتادة قال ما بعث الله نبيا إلا حسن الوجه وحسن الصوت وكان نبيكم صلى الله عليه وسلم حسن الوجه وحسن الصوت وكان لا يرجع. On the authority of Qatada, who reported, Allah never sent a prophet except that he had a handsome countenance and a beautiful voice. And your prophet has a handsome face and a beautiful voice. And he would not recite the same verses in his prayers over and over. He would recite different verses in his prayers. Then the last hadith of the section, عن ابن عباس رضي الله عنهما قال كان قراءة النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم ربما يسمعه من في الحجرة وهو في البيت. On the authority of Ibn Abbas رضي الله عنهما, who reported the Prophet's recitation was such, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that one who was in the courtyard could hear it while the Prophet ﷺ was in his house. So, to give you a sense of the construction of Al-Medina, or the cityscape, or the construction of the mission of the Prophet ﷺ, perhaps more appropriate to say, the courtyard of the masjid, where the people would pray, was like the middle. And then around the perimeter of the masjid, these were the hujurat, the apartments, right, where the Prophet ﷺ and his family lived. So Ibn Abbas said, if you were in the courtyard of the masjid, you would be able to hear the Prophet ﷺ reciting Quran from inside his apartment, right? So, mashallah, we are on hadith number 322, and we will begin a chapter I know the brothers will love. Babu ma ja'a fi buka'i Rasulillahi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What has been narrated concerning the crying of the Prophet alayhi wasallam, the weeping of the Prophet alayhi wasallam. Exercise some of this toxic masculinity. It's okay to cry. Now, I mean, this is a pre-modern book, and Imam at-Tirmidhi includes a chapter on the weeping of the Prophet alayhi wasallam. It's interesting. Right? He thought this was significant enough that I have to collect hadith about the Prophet weeping. Because people have to know it is okay to weep. The Messenger of Allah used to weep. It's okay to cry. Right? So, mashallah. So we'll stop there, inshallah. كل قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. We maybe have time for maybe a half question. Maybe one question or so. So, alhamdulillah. Jazakumullahu khair. MashaAllah. Very good to have you. MashaAllah. Ala, Eric, Ahmed, Asra, Amanda. Very, very good to have all of you. We miss you. Please come back to the station.
We
Well,
will.
if you can, man. I know you and Eric live so far away. Inshallah. Inshallah. MashaAllah. Getting there, Sister Sonia. Getting there to the completion of the book. Getting there. MashaAllah.